Give me your thoughts on Kevin Durant being traded to the Phoenix Suns and joining forces alongside Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton.
Man, I got to start this off with David Stern is rolling in his grave. If you vetoed Chris Paul going to the Lakers with Kobe Bryant, what in the hell do you think is going to happen when you allow Kevin Durant to join his second super team in the last decade? Are you kidding me? Like this is what we're doing right now? Like Kevin Durant throws a tantrum, not happy with how things happened in Brooklyn, even though he chose to go there, decided to go with a guy that's very inconsistent in Kyrie Irving, and then request a trade again for the second time. I, it, I I'm not going to get into what I think about KD. I used to respect him, but now that this is his second move out of a situation that he pretty much fully had control of because of his decision, I think it's just a little on the weird side. It's a little on the weak side as well. But in terms of the trade overall, we all know the personnel that Phoenix has now. When you talk about Chris Paul and what he brings to the table, Kevin Durant going there alleviates a lot of the stress. Chris doesn't necessarily have to score at all. He doesn't have to be the second fiddle to Devin Booker's offense. It's going to be the two of them. And Chris Paul, he's probably licking his chops right now because his job just became easier. All he's got to do is feed scores and he's going to rack up assists. All he's got to do is put his effort on the defensive side and at least play somewhat consistent defense. Especially because Kevin Durant, spot up shooter, creates shots for himself as well as Devin Booker. Then you're talking about what they acquired on the Brooklyn side. I mean, you're talking about a great defender, a great two-way player in Mikal Bridges, a great shooter in Cam Johnson, and then all of that capital. I mean, who's to say that the Nets didn't win this trade? Because if all is said and done, right? If Chris Paul ends up not panning out this year in terms of how because he's been very inconsistent. If the Suns falter, if the Suns don't win, do the Nets win this trade? I mean, I know that there's a couple more years left on Kevin Durant's contract, but with what they just paid DeAndre Ayton, what they owe Devin Booker, what they owe Chris Paul, now what they're going to be able to owe Kevin Durant, those are a bunch of max contracts sitting on the table. I don't know if Phoenix can continue to afford that with everything else on their roster. So they might have to make some financial adjustments come the offseason. But in terms of what the Nets were able to receive, I think the Nets did a very good job for the haul. I mean, it's Kevin Durant. You know that one of the best players in the NBA. He wasn't going to come cheap. So I thought that this trade went very well. This gives Phoenix that additional edge, that primary score, that somebody that can take that weight off of Devin Booker's shoulders. We all know that Devin Booker is no scrub. We know that he doesn't shy away from a moment. We know that when he needs to step up, he steps up, aside from Game 7 against Dallas, where Phoenix pretty much just disappeared. This gives them so much more offensive firepower, and KD has been known since going to Golden State, has also improved on his defensive capabilities. He's not someone that's going to go and score and play no defense like Carmelo Anthony. He's actually somebody that can alter shots with his height. He can block shots as well. He can guard 3, 4, and sometimes the 5, depending on who it is because of his length. So I will say that Phoenix 100% got better, but I'm not going to go as far and say that they're the outright winners. It depends on how Kevin Durant is going to end up meshing with his other teammates, how him and Devin Booker are going to coexist. And of course, what is Chris Paul going to be able to contribute? Like I said, is he going to just strictly become a facilitator? Is he going to be someone that's trying to incorporate his skill into the offense? We don't know. But from what Brooklyn got from Dallas and what Brooklyn now got from Phoenix, I believe that Brooklyn is in a poised position right now that we'll get into in a few minutes to be a team to compete with this depth on their roster and, of course, have the draft capital to go out there and either acquire more pieces or leverage just a younger roster. So I say that this is a good trade for both sides. Obviously, with Kyrie leaving the way that he did, Kevin Durant not wanting to be there, I think it was just best for them to part ways, both of them. And the way that they did it, again, not the way that I would have wanted, but it is what it is. Overall, the trade was just incredibly entertaining. And just to kind of give you guys clarity, there were additional things that were added as the trade had to be ironed out. So Jay Crowder did go to Brooklyn, but then Brooklyn traded Jay Crowder to the Bucks. And then they also had to kind of throw in another team, which included the Pacers. So the Pacers ended up getting George Hill, Serge Ibaka, Jordan Norwa, 3 second-round picks, and cash considerations. So it was kind of like a four-team total trade, and then there were additional picks thrown at Brooklyn, 2 specifically from Milwaukee. So then Brooklyn also gets a 2028 second-round pick from Milwaukee and a 2029 second-round pick from Milwaukee. So overall, I think all teams end up winning here. Maybe not the Pacers, but I mean, at the end of the day, Kevin Durant's a Phoenix Sun, and They're looking to compete in an already super stacked West, and we'll see what happens come April.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to the meshing part that you brought up with Kevin Durant now joining forces with Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton, excuse me, that's going to be something that I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on because, when you build up these super teams, the instant assumption is, oh, these teams are going to be in prime contention for a finals appearance and potential NBA champions. But as we saw in Brooklyn, when they formed KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, Kev, they never even made it NBA finals as a unit. I think I saw a stat before we started recording that KD, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving only played a total of 13.
16.
Oh, 16? I thought it was 13.
I saw something that said 16. Maybe that included the playoffs, but I don't think Kyrie played with them in the playoffs.
Well,
Either way,
despite whatever the number is it was under 20 games as a unit. Now, when KD joins forces with the Suns, are we going to see something that is going to reoccur in Phoenix like it did in Brooklyn, or are we going to see more consistency where KD is going to play alongside these guys that I just mentioned? Best case scenario for Phoenix is he does, and it puts Phoenix in a position where, honestly, Kev, sky's the limit here. If they mesh and they all stay relatively healthy, I think they have a very good pathway forward in the Western Conference, and that's despite the fact that the Western Conference is stacked once again. Obviously, Kevin Durant is somebody that can get you 30, 35 points a game. And granted, his role is probably going to change a little bit being in Phoenix's offense compared to what it was in Brooklyn, because in Brooklyn, he was the number one guy. Kyrie was right alongside him, but basically KD was the alpha here. Now, in Phoenix, it may change a little bit just because Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton have been there longer, and KD's coming into a new offensive system. It may take a little bit getting used to for KD, so maybe at first we won't see him as effective just because he's getting comfortable running their offense in Phoenix. So it may be a little bit rusty from KD for the first, week or two, but I think after that, I think he'll be able to adjust pretty significantly in a positive manner for Phoenix moving forward. It's just, I keep rounding back to this super team part. Just because that they added Kevin Durant, it doesn't instantly mean that the Suns are going straight to the finals and that we are going to prematurely crown them as NBA champions. I have to see how these guys play together. And this was something that Kevin had brought up when Kyrie was traded to Dallas. Now, Kyrie's 1-0 as a Maverick so far, but Luka didn't play in that one game, and we still have to see how Kyrie and Luka are going to mesh moving forward. And that's going to be pretty significant because you have two ball-dominant players with Kyrie and Luka on the same team. When it comes to Phoenix now, you have three players that could potentially be ball-dominant players on the same roster. Obviously, they'll have to work it out. This is something that Phoenix as a whole is going to have to work out probably over the next week or so. And I think if they work it out properly, they'll be in a good position moving forward. But overall, I think it's a good move for Phoenix as a whole. It puts them at the top of the Western Conference as far as I'm concerned. They have a very good chance to claim one of the top spots in the Western Conference. And we'll just kind of see how it goes from there. When it comes to Brooklyn seems like to me that they're in a position where they're building for the future. With them pretty much stockpiling a lot of these picks that they picked up in these trades before the trade deadline, they were able to bring back a pretty solid core group of guys right now. You could look at guys like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. You have Ben Simmons. Like, they have a pretty solid team moving forward. And then you also have Cam Thomas in there as well. So overall, when it comes to Brooklyn's going to be in a position where they're going to have to make a choice this offseason. Are they going to move on from these guys and get more draft capital back at their disposal? Or are they going to build around these guys that they brought into the fold by all these trades? If I had to guess, I think more than likely they're going to hear trade offers throughout the offseason. And if they get the right offers, they'll probably move on from these guys that they just picked up at the trade deadline and probably start a full rebuild. So overall, I think both teams here, when it comes to the Nets and the Suns, have positive ways to look at this trade. I think it actually benefits them. I think for Phoenix, it benefits them in the short term. I think when it comes to Brooklyn, it may benefit them in the long run. But overall, I think this was a fair trade amongst both teams here, and we shall see how both teams adjust with essentially new players in the fold for each respective roster.